Hi, this is Irma for Massage Planet News, and we're in the yoga house, and we have here with us a wonderful nutritionist, Sarah Stark. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And we will be preparing later on during the interview something really delicious, and I can't wait. After my time yoga this morning, I'm hungry. I'd like to know a little bit more about your background and what took you on the path of becoming a nutritionist, and why are you so passionate about nutrition and food?
Okay. Well, I was probably the most unlikely candidate to become a nutritionist. I grew up eating raw hot dogs, Mr. Noodles, Kraft dinner, and M&M's frozen pizza and cereal for dinner. And that was, pretty much what I lived off of until my late teens, and about a 1 liter bag of milk every day. So I grew up on antibiotics about 8 to 10 months out of the year, every year, until my early 20s. And went to dietitian, went to doctors, just, from all the inflammation, and I wasn't happy. Everything was sore, it was stiff, just wasn't fluid, my thinking wasn't clear, and went to a dietitian, and the dietitian really recommended I eat more dairy and more gluten. Oh. So I followed those instructions and ended up gaining about 40 pounds. And couldn't do anything to get it off. Went back to the dietitian, went to the doctors. They finally put me on some weight loss medication. And that started to help a little bit. But as soon as I'd go off, it would almost double back. So in my early 20s, I went and had an energy treatment done with Barb Keshen, who's a Reiki master in Toronto and does EMF, which is electromagnetic frequency adjustments. And after the EMF treatment, went home, poured my big glass of milk like I would every day. As soon as I walk in the door, started to drink it and just spit it out. And that was it. And no more dairy after that. It was just an energy thing for me at that time. And as soon as I cut it out, no antibiotics, dropped 40 pounds within a couple of months, and it just completely transformed my life. I just felt so much better health-wise. I had energy for the first time. I could concentrate for the first time. Was in a good mood consistently because my hormones were then balanced, and it was just absolutely transformational. So that started it.
You made the connection that your diet was making you sick, and it was a downward spiral from there, because then you had the antibiotics, and like one thing fed the other.
Exactly.
And so what is your base now? Like, what do you eat? What are you, vegan, vegetarian? Like, what happened after that?
Well, I went vegetarian at 12. So I now eat fish, and that was after I moved out to the West Coast. While living on the coast, it was part of the local diet, and I started to start eating fish and oysters. Even though I still do that now, I'm very particular about it. So I only eat sustainably caught fish. If I were to eat salmon, only wild salmon, just for the political reasons as well, and just environmental reasons. So I'm very, very particular about my seafood intake. But I do eat seafood, and I also eat locally farmed eggs. And so I do include those now. I still don't eat meat. So that's been over 20 years, and I don't think I'll go back there. It turns out with the dairy, I'm actually allergic to it, and that's because the protein is so big in it. So I just don't do well with large protein sizes. So my body chemistry and animal protein just doesn't really work. Now I'll do little tiny bits of dairy for special occasions or more in a communal setting, and that will be goat or sheep. But that's the extent of dairy at this point.
Yeah, for me, myself, I never found that dairy was like milk products. For me, was never seemed natural, like something that we should be doing. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Well, we're the only mammals that drink another mammal's milk, which, you don't see animals in nature feeding off other animals usually unless they've been orphaned and it's required. And to be a grown adult and still be taking in this amount of milk isn't necessarily healthy. It's highly inflammatory. It's congesting. It really does cause a lot of health issues. And with dairy on the market now, even though the animals themselves aren't genetically modified, most of the feed is. And alfalfa has now been approved for genetic modification. So you can be pretty assured that any kind of mass farmed meat that you're going to take in is going to have a genetically modified organism in there. So it's and that's where the milk's coming from. And these animals are stressed. Mastitis is huge in the dairy industry, and that's swelling of the udders. And there's a certain amount of acceptable blood and pus that's allowed into your dairy products. So it's not really the most nutritional source, even though, we're really taught by the dairy board that drink more milk for calcium. Milk is actually one of the worst forms of your calcium intake. And that's because when you're taking it in order to uptake all that calcium, you're actually leaching stored calcium from your bone. So it's much better to get your calcium from something like black sesame seeds or dark leafy greens or almonds. So there are a lot of alternative sources for, that kind of beat the big dairy myth. Mm-hmm. And when you do take dairy, you do notice a huge difference in inflammation. It's acidic as well, so it does make the system acidic, and most disease starts with acidity.
When your body becomes too acidic, then disease starts.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're a perfect breeding ground for a lot of major diseases to come up. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to ask you then, are you helping people with, what do you do? Counsel them for nutrition or, So you're helping with, are they coming to you with illnesses or concerns?
Yeah, usually for someone to come to see a nutritionist, it's they're either already very interested in health or there's an extreme case. We have a saying in the nutrition industry that people would rather change their religion before they change their diet. And it's pretty true. People, are either stuck with the same foods or they're eating those same foods for a reason. A lot of times the foods that we eat the most are the foods that we're actually allergic to or have an intolerance to. And it's the antibody reaction in our system that makes us want to crave it more. So yeah, I help people very easily. I like to make it an easy transition. So, for example, if you came to me and, you're big on gluten, which is also inflammatory and is genetically modified, and people are eating it 3 times a day, I'd start by saying, great, you need your bread, you're not ready to give up your bread, try making this natural banana bread recipe. Use natural sweeteners. Try an alternative flour. Start with baby steps. Start weaning yourself onto these things. And don't really focus so much on taking things out, but more on what can you add in and what kind of shifts can you make that are going to be really delicious to get you interested in making more changes. So I do guide people with consultations. I also do online consultations and offer cooking classes as well. So to get people interested and start looking at ingredients a little bit differently. Maybe they wouldn't typically use something like avocado that we're going to work with today in a pudding. Maybe they're thinking guacamole, but you'll see it's actually an incredible ingredient to work with as a dessert. So I like to shift people's thinking a little bit. I don't want to overwhelm anyone. Usually if it's overwhelming, they'll do it for a week or two and then it just kind of dwindles away. Mm-hmm. So I like to really work with people for permanent changes.
And you're the perfect example because you were eating, traditional stuff, and you change, so you know what people are going through, and that change sometimes isn't always easy, unless you really, really come to a point where you have an illness and you don't have a choice, or you've gained, so much weight that your life isn't comfortable anymore, and you want to lose the weight, and your body's become very toxic. So what are the foods that you think should be avoided, period?
Well, it's a little bit controversial with a lot of people, but I really think people should be avoiding dairy. I think they should be avoiding gluten, and if they're not ready to entirely avoid it, I think they should cut back. Most people are eating these things 2 to 3 times a day. So look at if you're stuck on dairy, you can't live without your milk. Start looking at organic milk. Talk to your farmers at the farmers market. Ask them about their milk. Start sourcing it from different places and just start there. And usually when people make even small changes like that, they start to feel better. They'll notice improvements in their health and they want to do more. So I don't necessarily, tell people to cut it out completely if they're stuck, but dairy would be the number 1. Gluten would be number 2, just because it's in everything, and it's
like pasta.
Exactly, yeah, and it's processed. Right. Most people aren't eating the wheat berries or the actual whole grain. Right. So I like to move people towards a whole food diet. So even cutting those two out, you're going to cut out most processed foods. So processed foods is also on the list, which I'm big on, and anything genetically modified. And they haven't done long-term research. What they do know is they're endocrine disruptors. And you disrupt your endocrine system, your adrenals are going to be off. You're going to be dealing with stress differently. Your hormones are going to be off. Your appetite's going to be changed. Your metabolism's going to be affected. Your mood's going to be affected. So those would be the top 3 things for sure.
Are we trying to buy more organic, more local, more fresh, which we're seeing too, like with chefs and just a shift in society of wanting to have fresh, local, less pesticides, less chemicals in our food? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that. I'm a big supporter of the farmers markets. I hit about 2 to 3 of them a week. So I'm huge on that. And I'm also really big on fresh food. So instead of going to a regular grocery store and stocking up once every 2 weeks, what's going to happen is some of that stuff's going to go bad in your fridge, or, you'll eat really well for the first few days and then you kind of dwindle into the processed foods. So yeah, go to the farmers market. Start looking into local. We have amazing local foods, and the greenhouse is available too. You can get a lot of foods year round that you wouldn't necessarily expect you could. Mm-hmm. So definitely supporting the local farmers is a huge step. And not only for the food, but because it's locally grown, the soil locally contains a lot of the nutrients that we need in this environment. And if it's grown organically, you're actually going to get more nutrients from that food, and not just because of the lack of pesticides, which is also important, but the dirt, the soil, it all starts there. So if your nutrients aren't in the soil, if that soil's not taken care of, then your food's not going to really be that nutrient dense. You might have the most beautiful apple in the world.
It looks fake. No, but I find that, I've been shopping organically because the taste is that much better. Like an apple is actually juicy, and who cares if there's little dots on it or a mark?
Yeah, exactly. It's much more concentrated nutrient-wise and taste-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll notice that for sure. You buy a conventional apple and, there's the thick wax on it, and then it's usually almost tasting like water. So you do get a lot more flavor from buying organic, and you need less too, because your body feels satiated with that nutrient-dense source, as opposed exactly. Yeah. So it does make a difference. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, there's a myth that buying organic is expensive, and it doesn't have to be. If you know how to plan or how to play with certain ingredients, it can actually be much more affordable.
Also, if you have a space to grow stuff, mm-hmm. I highly encourage it. What about you? You have your garden that you like to play in?
Yes, I have a really small garden space, just a little back patio, and I maximize it. So I grow tomatoes, lots of different greens, a lot of different herbs. I have a lot of edible flowers as well, and I also have a vermicompost, so I'm always making sure that my soil is really nutrient dense, but I absolutely maximize. I grow what I can, and in the winter too, I try and grow some herbs, and I studied permaculture, so that's a big part of my approach as well. So I really look, how we can live in harmony with the environment and growing our own food. And it's really empowering too, to grow your food, to see the process, the seedlings, to see, how long it takes to reach maturity. And then when you grab that food out of your own garden, it's so rewarding. You've seen the whole process. You've been there every day with it. You've been watering it, nurturing it, and now it in turn can nurture you.
Well, yes, and there's such a disconnect now with children who have no idea where food comes from. They think it's from the grocery store.
Yeah, well, I know that there's some children out there that they don't really even know what a carrot looks like. They know baby carrots. Mm-hmm. If you show them an actual carrot, wow, this is a carrot? So it's a complete disconnect. And you really need to empower kids to make healthy food choices, especially the younger ones now. They're going to grow up and be bombarded with fake foods, genetically modified foods. So to really connect them, get their hands in the dirt a little bit, show them a seedling as opposed to this is what it starts at, and then this is the beautiful tomato you get. And kids love it.
Yes, I see that some schools have made the effort to actually have gardens in their schoolyards and let kids grow food and get, because it's such a beautiful process, and they get to see and taste. Like maybe lunches in the schools are not as healthy as they should be.
Yeah, the lunches in schools are definitely leave something to be desired for sure. Even when I was going to school, French fries was the big seller, samosas, those sorts of things. So, yeah, really letting kids know you can actually have a meal that's delicious, and it's actually going to make you think more. You'll be able to concentrate in class more if you're getting the right kinds of foods. If you're avoiding sugars, the kids are being pumped full of sugars, and it's making them tired. They can't concentrate, and it's really going to affect them long term. So these are things that, how can you eat foods that are going to really benefit you?
Well, we're seeing an epidemic of obesity, especially here in America and Canada. And diabetes is up, and cancer is up, and people will say, well, I don't have time to. What do you say when people say, I don't have time to do all that, or to cook, or to, and they're popping something in the microwave?
Oh, the microwave. Oh.
I threw out my microwave.
I try and show them ways that time a few years ago absolutely would have been a valid excuse. But especially living in a city like Toronto, you don't even need time. There are amazing CSAs, which are community supported agriculture delivery services. So you can't make it to the farmer's market, that's fine. They'll deliver it to you every week. If you don't have time to make smoothies every day, there are companies in the city that will deliver to your front door every morning fresh smoothies, fresh organic meals made. So it's not so much about time anymore. It's really just about the will. If you're willing for it to happen, if you're ready for it to happen, it's absolutely available to you.
And there's no time consumed by picking up a banana and peeling it back. I mean, there's not even any cooking here involved. Like, you can make a choice to have that instead of, like, let's say a chocolate bar.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're going to get way more benefits from the banana. It'll give you longer sustained energy as opposed to a chocolate bar. So, and people, when they start trying it, they start noticing it, and it's the little shifts. And so, for instance, if you came and said, I can't give up my chocolate, I'd say, fine, we're going to find you the best quality organic chocolate available, and we're going to get you started with that. I'd show them how to make at-home fudge recipes, these sorts of things. So it's not necessarily about losing any of the tasty things in your diet. If anything, you're going to find even more flavor-intense items.
Where did you learn how to cook like this?
Well, I started cooking for myself at 10. And when I went vegetarian at 12, it was, the family was just, well, you're on your own. So
they abandoned you?
Pretty much on my own. And at that time, I really went heavy. Cheese was the new meat.
Yeah.
So it didn't take that much of an adjustment. But in my early 20s, I went vegan for 10 years, and that got me hooked on cooking. And this was before you could buy veggie dogs at the grocery store. I had to drive an hour to a store to find them. So if I wanted to eat, I had to really make everything from scratch. And you just get addicted to it, playing with the colors and the flavors and trying new spices. Yeah. Exactly. And, it almost becomes a meditation of sorts, being in the kitchen. You're working with the foods, and I do certain things intentionally. So I'll cut things along their lifeline. So then you can actually see the beauty of the food. If you cut a red pepper lengthwise, it still tastes the same, but if you cut it so you see the lifeline, it's beautiful inside, and the shapes inside. And so I really started looking in that aspect of things too, and just incorporating it as a meditation every day.
All right, do you have any plans for, like, doing a cookbook or putting something out?
Yeah, absolutely. I have got a couple of them in the works. I have 2 kids' cookbooks that I've got the outlines done, and have an illustrator that's working on them. And then also have an adults cookbook that I'm working on. And that one's going to be focused more on energy, just helping you get energized, certain foods that can do that. But yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna be having those soon. Yeah,
oh,
they're
good.
in the works.
I'm going to be looking for it.
Great.
So let's make something. Shall we?
So we're going to make a really simple recipe.
Okay.
This takes about 5 minutes, and it's for chocolate lovers. So it is a raw cacao avocado pudding. And typically for myself, I would do I would do this a little bit more just on the raw side with just cacao. But I'm going to add in some organic cocoa as well, just because it's a transition food. So if you're not used to raw cacao, you're still getting a little bit of that normal chocolate flavor. Raw cacao is a little bit more bitter than your typical cocoa. So we're going to incorporate just a little bit of organic cocoa in there. And we have hemp seeds. So hemp is a Canadian food, And this is produced by Mum's company, and MUM. And this is a great source of protein and essential fatty acids.
Okay.
And a lot of people get afraid of fats when you talk about fats, like the avocado fat. But good, healthy fats are actually going to boost your metabolism. It's going to help with hair, skin, nails. And your brain is mostly made up of DHA, which is one of the fats. So if you can get that into your brain, it's going to help with brain function, focus. You can think more clearly. So
And your body gets rid of it. It's not like a bad fat where it stays in your body.
exactly. And avocado is a saturated fat, as well as coconut. We're going to be using some coconut milk. But both of these are saturated fats that actually support your system, as opposed to a processed vegetable oil that your body's going to store that. This is actually increasing your metabolism, wanting you to burn this fat.
Okay.
So it's a great benefit to you. So we'll start with, what I did was I soaked just a few dates for about an hour, hour and a half. And I'm using dates as the sweetener because you're going to get the fiber aspect from the dates, but it's also a natural sweetener. So I don't use any kind of processed sugars or anything like that. And once you start exploring sweeteners, you realize you don't need them. And if anything, when you do use them, you get a really great spike and then you crash.
Yeah.
So I like to use sweeteners that are going to really sustain you and sustain your energy. So there's about 4 dates in there, and I just saved a little bit of the date water because that has a lot of the sweetness too. And we're going to need a little bit of liquid just to stir it up. So we'll put the dates in, and I'm just going to blend those first because that's going to be the toughest one. And I do a couple different puddings. Oh. So I do a couple of different puddings. So this one's going to be a little bit more textured. I'm adding in cacao nibs, which is going to be a little bit of a crunch, and the hemp seeds.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave the dates a little bit textured, just so you can get the flavor of them and get a little bit of a bite. So I'm going to put in some raw cacao powder.
Sarah, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you said about sweeteners, would you use agave?
Agave it's a great alternative to sugar, but it's a really high on the glycemic index.
Oh,
So it's higher than fructose syrup.
Oh,
Yeah, so when it came out, it was great. I went through so much agave, and now the research is showing that it actually gives you a big blood sugar spike. So,
okay.
yeah, so I'm more on the natural local honeys now. I use things like lucuma, and that's Lucuma, and that's a Peruvian fruit, and it's a great sweetener. It actually has a maple syrup taste to it. So for Canadians, it's a perfect kind of interim. And maple syrup,
It's good for you.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's full of nutrients. You're getting zinc, you're getting manganese. It's local.
Yes.
Canadians don't really have a lot of identity to their local foods. They don't, even really know which foods are local. So if you know of a local food and you like it, start using it more. Start becoming enthusiastic about it.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to put in some hemp seeds. Now I'm just kind of eyeing it because when you're working with natural ingredients, flavors are always going to change. So they're going to be, a little bit more bitter or a little bit more sweet. So you just kind of play around with it. And that's part of the fun about learning how to cook, is that you get to be your taste tester. You get to, be a little chemist and add in what you want. And it's a lot of fun to play in the kitchen. So I'm putting in a little bit of organic cocoa. I'm going to save some just in case we need a little bit more, but I think that should be enough. Whenever you're working with sweets, a pinch of salt, it really does make a difference. And I'm using organic sea salt. And I've got the cacao nibs. Now this is chocolate in its raw state. And it's pretty bitter, but it's also one of the highest antioxidants that you can use. So, and you're getting magnesium too, and this has PEA, and what that is that's the love molecule. So it's the feel-good molecule, and that's what everybody talks about with chocolate. But when you're eating regular chocolate, it goes through a Dutching process. And so what the Dutching process does is it removes the bitter part that we're going to taste from the raw cacao. And at the same time as removing the bitters, it's removing the antioxidants. So when you hear chocolate being the superfood, most chocolate isn't. You want to get an undutched raw chocolate if you can. There's a couple of bars on the market that are undutched, but they're mostly
Still
raw food.
not even if you buy like organic.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
No, the
I
organic,
didn't know
you're
that.
avoiding the pesticides, so you're not getting in the extra chemicals,
Yeah.
but you're not
It's
getting a
still
lot of the
not-
benefits.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to put some of those in just for a little bit of crunch. And we'll put the avocado in.
My favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I eat a lot of avocados just because I don't eat meat. So, they make great sandwiches.
And I just tried them grilled for the first time the other day
really?
to make guacamole. And it was amazing. It was so delicious.
Well, I like exploring cookbooks because you're not eating the same thing over and over again. And, that can get a little boring sometimes. I try to get a little more creative with my stuff. But, when you're busy too, it's like, okay.
Yeah. And with avocados, how many times have we thrown an avocado out because it's,
Oh, I know.
Right? So this too, just you can make it, and this freezes great. So if you've got avocados that are about to go, yeah, just throw it in.
Okay.
So I'm just going to squeeze these guys in here. Wow, this is such a great healthy dessert.
I know. And it's a dessert. That's the...
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people aren't used to that with avocado.
I know. I didn't know you can make dessert with avocados.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah.
And I also like to use my hands a lot. So I'm really big on connecting with your food. So get in there with your hands, don't be afraid to get underneath your nails. Really feel the food and get an idea of what it is that you're putting into your body and what's going to nourish you.
That's true.
I think that's really important.
Well, I think we also use food as entertaining ourselves. And, we don't think of it as nourishing our bodies of the minerals and vitamins that it needs to function properly.
Mm-hmm. You truly are what you eat.
Yeah.
And another great aspect about getting empowered with food is that it's a huge political statement. You put your money where your mouth is. If you don't want to support GMOs, buy non-GMO. It's so empowering. It's so much easier to send a message to the big corporations about food than one would think. You don't need to protest. I mean, a lot of people, it's great if you are protesting, if that's your thing. But the most powerful thing is where you spend your money.
Yeah, so we have a choice as citizens to not buy certain products, and that product will cease to exist, or the institutions that are producing, because we're going to be wanting to spending like our money in healthy, organic, local foods.
Exactly, yeah. And North America is a little bit behind with that. So in Europe, a lot of countries have banned GMOs. Hungary burnt down all the GMO fields. And so people really can be empowered to do something about this. So I really encourage people to, print out the GMO list, the dirty dozen, find out what it is. And just, even if you're not ready to go organic, start looking at least buying those ingredients, not GMO.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm just going to quickly rinse here.
Okay.
My battery's gonna die soon.
Okay. We'll just go quickly into the dessert because it's batteries.
Oh, okay. So, one more thing I'm going to add into this one. I'm going to make it a little bit different than normal. Is I've got this great Arvinda's chai masala. And this is a Canadian company, and they're based out of Montreal, which is another reason why I like to support them. We're still looking at, somewhat local. A lot of the ingredients in here, they are sourcing from India. But chai masala is actually a great spice mix to have in your cupboard and use for things other than chai tea. And that's because there's some warming spices in here. So you're going to get ginger, which is anti-inflammatory and also helps with digestion. You're getting the cinnamon, which is going to help regulate your blood sugar. So there's a lot of great aspects to looking at these spices that aren't so typical in the Canadian cuisine. So again, I'm just going to kind of eye it. I'm going to go a little bit light because it is more of a flavor. Okay, I'm just going to quickly add in some coconut milk. And I love coconut milk for a few different reasons. Again, it's a healthy fat, but in the coconut milk, you're also getting the water aspects as well. And that's loaded with a lot of electrolytes, so it's hydrating too.
All right, so we finished our avocado pudding, and I ate mine. It was really delicious. And did you want to try it?
I do. Because oh my God.
It's so delicious. I can't wait to have your cookbook because
This one is,
I want
this
to be
one
more
is more
creative.
like green than mine. I'm going to use just dates because I use maple syrup, and I can get more like the taste of the hemp this way. Mm-hmm. I don't put hemp in mine. This is really good.
Well, the hemp adds the protein to it,
Yeah.
so you're getting extra protein.
That's really good.
I can spend all day here today. I'm just gonna take a nap right here. I'm moving in. No.
Me too.
You too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a great space.
So you're teaching cooking, you're a nutritionist, and where can people find you if they want to consult with you or know more about what you do?
So I'm available for online consultations. So it's available anywhere in the world, and they can email me at vegsarah, VEGSARAH @gmail.com. And I also will be at the Vitalife Clinic down in the beaches in Toronto, and that's a colon hydrotherapy clinic. So that treatment is available, as well as some nutritional consultations through that clinic.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, both of you, for having us here today and for sharing your stories with us. We'll look forward to seeing you online and, sharing this information with everybody for Massage Planet News.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have a little friend there.